guys, it's Emily, and today I'm here to bring you a wrap-up of the last 3 books that I read for Nonfiction November. They were all only okay reads for me, which is kind of unfortunate. This Nonfiction November was kind of like mediocre overall. I didn't have any books that I really loved, which, it happens, so it was okay, but none of these I would say were great or new favorites or anything, but let's get into them. The first book that I finished recently was The Man Who Loved Books Too Much by Allison Hoover Bartlett, and this is a book that follows a man named John Gilkey, who was a rare books thief, and I think he might still be alive because this was published, in 2005 or so it's fairly recent. But John Gilkey still wrote rare books, and Allison Bartlett becomes interested in him after hearing about him from a rare books dealer named Ken Saunders, and Ken Saunders is trying to track John Gilkey down, and at the time she first hears about him, he's in prison. So she goes to visit him in prison, and then eventually he gets out, and she interviews him. So this is basically a detailing of his life and a detailing of Allison's time interviewing him, and she also interviews Ken Sanders, and she goes around and visits rare books fairs, and she gets really interested in rare books and collecting rare books and things like that. So this was only fair. For one thing, I'm not that interested in book collecting. I don't really get the point of buying books that you can't read. You have to store them in a special way and, do all kinds of stuff to preserve them. And to me, it just seems like a waste of time. Sorry to say. And then I didn't really understand why she was so interested in John Gilkey. I mean, John Gilkey is a terrible person. The way he gets these rare books that he steals is he worked at Saks Fifth Avenue for a while, and he used to steal credit card numbers, and then he'd use the credit card numbers to buy the books, and then he'd just, get the book, and then by the time they figured out it was not a real transaction, he'd be long gone, and it's crazy, and I just don't get why she would be so interested in him. I guess I thought this was going to be more exciting and more detailing how they caught John Gilkey, but it was literally just her talking to John Gilkey and visiting him, and one time they go to a rare bookstore together, and he's explaining how he steals the bookstore, and it was just it was okay, but I wouldn't really recommend it. I then read a book for a interfaith book club or book discussion that my church hosted, and that was Abraham, A Journey to the Heart of Three Faiths by Bruce Feiler, or Feller maybe, and this is his account of going to the Middle East, specifically Jerusalem, and visiting all the spots that are held to be part of Abraham's life, his grave, the place where he and his son Isaac went for this sacrificing, things like that. And he's also detailing the history of Abraham and how Abraham became so prominent in all 3 of the major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And it was okay, but it wasn't that great. I mean, I didn't think the writing was that good. And then when I went to the discussion for this book, the Muslims women that were there talked about how he got several things wrong when he was referencing the Quran, and it just felt like it was very poorly researched, and I don't really agree with the idea of not doing your due diligence if you're going to do a nonfiction book. So, and also, I sort of felt like this was just his personal story and his personal journey into figuring out what Abraham was to him versus an actual historical, factual, displaying of the facts and comparison of the 3 religions. And I don't know, it wasn't as good as I had hoped. Again, it was sort of whatever. And I was, overall, the discussion, when I went to the discussion group, it was very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. This is an interfaith group called Daughters of Abraham. If you've ever heard of it, I believe it's a nationwide group, and my church just happened to host the meeting this time. They're hosted all over the Dallas area, and I would like to get more involved in the group because I feel like they have a lot of similar religious beliefs to me, but I wasn't impressed. And this is actually the first time they discussed the book. Normally they just pick like a topic and they discuss the topic at large and they don't focus on any specific writings, other than the religious writings, the Bible and the Torah and the Quran. But anyway, so this was good, but again, I felt like it could have been better and it wasn't exactly what I expected it to be. The third book that I finished recently, I actually finished it last night, was Charity by Mary Karr. This is her follow-up memoir to The Liars Club, which I read a few years ago, and I thought it was very beautifully written, and I don't want to say I enjoyed it because it does detail child abuse that she suffered, but it was very interesting. So that book covers her childhood, and this covers her teenage years. She grew up in a town right outside of Houston that was like an oil refinery town. Everybody worked at the oil refinery, and it was a very small town, and life was kind of boring. So she got involved in the drug culture there, and so it's pretty close to the beach, the Galveston beach. So she and her friends used to go to the beach every weekend and smoke pot and drop acid and do whatever. And so it's very sad because you see how these drugs destroyed a lot of people's lives, and she talks about how several of them died of overdoses, and some of them went to jail, and she actually goes to jail once in this book, but she gets out because her mother knows the judge and is able to get her out, and so it's all about her life, but it also talks about her friendships. She has two very good friends named Clarice and Meredith, and she also talks about her sexual awakening. The Charity refers to, popping the cherry, because she has several boyfriends and she loses her virginity to one of them. Although, if you've read the first book, she was sexually abused as a child. So she does talk about a little bit in here how she isn't sure she's a virgin, and so she doesn't know whether she's really losing her virginity or not. But anyway, this is a really sad book. It wasn't as, in my opinion, it wasn't as moving as The Liars Club was, because it's almost boring in some ways, because again, they do a lot of the same things over and over. They go to the beach, they take acid or they do whatever, and then she talks a lot about their hallucinations, and it's kind of crazy and weird, and I wasn't really impressed with them. I mean, obviously she's a teenager and she doesn't know, what she's doing, and she's bored and she's lonely, and her parents are very neglectful and, selfish. So, I mean, I understand why she was involved with the drug culture and all that, but it just, I don't know, I guess I wasn't as sympathetic to her as I was during the Liars Club. So this was good, and but see, I can't really recommend it because I feel like you have to read The Liars Club first to fully get everything out of this, because she does talk about things that she mentioned in The Liars Club. So this was okay. I'm glad I read it. I don't know if I will pick up her next memoir, which is called Glit, which I think is detailing her college years. But this was okay, but again, it wasn't like amazing or anything, in my opinion. So currently I am reading Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. And this, of course, you'll probably seen it. It's a book to Darling, and it's also a real life Darling. I got this copy from my mom. She went out and bought it after all of her friends started telling her she should read it, and I'm actually trying to finish it pretty quickly because when I'm filming this, it's like 2 days before Thanksgiving, and my mom wants to give this to my aunt when we get to see her at Thanksgiving. So I'm trying really hard to finish it so that I can pass it back to my mom, who can pass it to her aunt. This is about Kaya, and she lives in the swamp, and it's about her growing up alone, and it's also a dual narrative story, and there's a murder mystery aspect, and it's pretty interesting. I'm flying through it. I'll talk more about it later when I actually finish it. But yeah, I just wanted to mention this because look, I'm actually reading a popular book when it's still popular. It's amazing. This like never happens. Usually I'm like 2 years behind when everybody else in terms of reading popular books. But yeah, so that's how I'm reading. Again, it's nonfiction November is nearly over. By the time you see this, it'll be December 1st. And I have like 8 books on my December TBR. So I'm looking forward to some great holiday reading. And I hope everybody else had a great nonfiction November and you're reading some great books. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!